Hi, this is Duncan Ferguson. I'm following up on a mini project that we did with DACVCP members. We had three of you complete the uh, mini project, which was about competencies in veterinary pharmacology. And so using those documents, I'm going to try to demonstrate how we work with those to do a map. Now, I'm doing this video because I realize we range from Canada to Australia, and I thought it might be easier for you all to take a look at this individually, and then we can you can gain your access to do your own playing around with this. And the first thing I want to point out is that this URL right up here, which is in numbers, would get you to an opening page like this, and you can use your CG Scholar login. I've already done that. And so what I'm wanting to do now is look at works. And I'm going to look at these as an admin, but you'd want to look at the ones that would be your works. And I'm going to pick the comparative clinical pharmacology, day one competency reflections. And you can see the three brave souls who developed something for us. And I'm just going to pick Trish Dowling's here. And you can see there are three versions of hers. The first one was the one she got feedback on, and then the next two were revisions. So I'm going to select the most recent one. Here it is on the left. So on the left-hand panel with CGMap, you basically are looking at a document. It can be any document that has text that you can put into this system. The easiest way to do that right now is to put a work that you created in Scholar. It can be any work, and it will come up under your works. And so the next thing we do is maps. I'm going to go ahead and start a new map, and I'm going to show you the types of maps we've created. So I'm creating a new map for this. I'm going to map Trish's final work, and the math type is a combination of the SNOMED and the VetCT extension of it, drug ontologies, and Google Translate. And so I'm going to use these for this particular, you can, in BioPortal, it includes over 900 different references. What I've done is focus on those that focus on drug ontology, because the key to mapping is to be using the most appropriate terminology, and then link that out to the real world. And you'll see as I do this, even in your own writing, that sometimes we have to make some interpretive suggestions to the system. And I also want to tell you that the veterinary extension of SNOMED, which is housed at, or was worked on and housed at Virginia Tech, is in here, and you'll see that it's very specific things that relate to veterinary medicine. And so it'll come up alongside of all of the other BioPortal terminologies, but I think only in a few cases, at least in pharmacology, will we find examples of where that might have the best reference ontology for that particular query, and we'll show you that, how we do that in a minute. So created this work. I'm going to make it shareable so I can share it with you later. And so here we are, we're going to get started. So what is the next step? The first thing is to explain that a query is if I highlight a topic and then look at what comes up from that set of ontologies. Analyze is going to be basically a Google Translate analysis. So those are the two main things that we have here. There are other potential capabilities that you can put in, and I'll include a video of the review capability that has been built into this with certain rubrics. So all the things that we did on CG Scholar could be done by your students using the rubrics on top of a document like this. Okay, so we've created our thing and now it's ready to go. So I'm going to start with finding some key topics that I think will be of interest here. So if we search pharmacokinetics, let's just pick the mesh terminology here, and you can add your own comment if you want to here to sort of relate why you picked that one, because there are many. You're going to get up to 100 suggestions of these various ontologies. And so you can see immediately what this has done, just like in searching in the library, mesh and its terminology connections are made to your document. So it's like you're taking your document and expanding it to the world. And when it comes to future artificial intelligence and mapping of the documents, you'll see that this capability improves the ability for artificial intelligence to make suggestions or even mentor students. So, so pharmacokinetics was the first one. I'm reading through her topics. Threshold concept is, I'm not sure we're going to find that in a medical ontology. She goes through talking about the idea of protein binding. So let's see what protein binding itself brings up. And you see that terminology by itself is fairly general. Oh, we might find it. Plasma protein binding capacity is being relevant to this. But I was going to suggest if it wasn't specific enough, I could also take that same term and say, you know what, Trish is talking to us. She knows we're pharmacologists, but in reality, what it might help to say is she's talking about drug plasma binding protein. Plasma binding. What does this call that? And then we can take that clarification, if you will, and try again. I'm not sure we're going to come up with anything different, but we can search that as a query. And let's just see what SNOMED comes up with here. You see, it's got very, very, very specific types of things, not relevant. It brings up the top 10. So it's not going to be really helpful here. So let's go back to these terminologies. And SNOMED is suggesting 900 different things. So drug interaction with drug, we're not talking about that. We might want to add plasma protein. That's probably not going to be the best choice, but it's not any better than this one. So let's go on from that. She goes on to talk about math, and there's nothing really I'm thinking it might be relevant to pharmacology until down here when it talks about NSAIDs. So let's select NSAIDs and see what comes up. And the drug ontology comes up with what an NSAID is here. Basically, it spells it out for you and gives you a definition. So that's pretty useful. And let's look at hypoalbuminemia. That might be useful, but nothing in bioportal, metabolic ascites. She's sort of referring to that in one way. So that could be another terminology. And she goes down to talk about interpreting culture and susceptibility results. So let's take a look what comes up there. And SNOMED CT has that term specifically, so we can bring it up. And you can see when you bring up one of these nodes, that's what they're called, and you click on it, it'll actually highlight with yellow highlighting what has been, what it connects to. She goes on to talk about culture and sensitivity, diagnostic labs. And then the last sort of thing I thought maybe we could talk about is a first line drug. Let's just say first line drug. See what it comes up with when we say first line. First line treatment, okay, that's another way of stating it. First line treatment. And let's just pick fluoroquinolones as another possible connection. And you can see we're now getting into some of the drug ontologies. Let's just pick one of those for interesting change of pace. You can see each of these different sources comes up. It doesn't have much in there other than it's a drug reference and it's a different color. We certainly can put more than one in if we want to. Now the other, we could select macrolides if we wanted to, but the other one I thought would be interesting is to see what it comes up with BRD. So a lot of acronyms, you're going to see, well, gee, these acronyms aren't very useful, are they? Not even in SNOMED. So that means it probably needs to be redefined by somebody, by human intelligence, if you will. And I'm going to call it bovine respiratory disease complex. And then I'm going to use that little bit of added text and query. And you can see this comes up with mesh as something here. Let's bring it up. We can organize all these later. And the other idea is to show how we can then map them or connect them. Now this is a very short work, so we may be pushing the limit of this in this particular short work, but let's do it again. See what the veterinary side comes up with. So yeah, it comes up with bovine respiratory disease complex, but it doesn't really provide, and this is a general thing, it's not providing a definition. The veterinary extension of SNOMED has a concept mapped to it, which is important, but it's very specific because it's an extension of the overall SNOMED database. So with these, let's just say we're going to stop there. We could add other things, but then you can start to use. You should know that you can close these up. Might make them easier to work with. We haven't added comments to all of them either, but I'm going to do this just to start. So you now know what's inside of these nodes. And they're creating the capability to grab these and kind of move them all up to the top. They can overlap, so they're more easy to visualize in one screen. The key thing to think about this is that these are concepts that aren't just in this document here, they're out there in the world, so to speak. And it becomes even more important as your students write, and that they start to see, well, what these terms are, or when they talk about PK, the world, or PD, you might need to actually spell it out in order for that to be fully come up with a full search. So as we look at pharmacokinetics, we're going to, I think the concept as it relates to her document here was the concept that's difficult to understand was plasma binding. So on a Mac, you have to sort of put down the command key. On a PC, I think you right click. So here we're connecting those two concepts. And this is the issue is this is a refinement of the concern of topic, I guess. So I'm going to call that. And remember what I did here was I moved this on to drug plasma binding, and this is sort of related, I guess is what I'd call that. I'm going to call that a refinement. And you can put arrows going in either direction or both directions. And then we get to what amounts to being an example that she brought up. We're going to build from these concepts. And plasma protein, we can say, relates to this. Call it a concept. So you get the idea. You can sort of start mapping. And this is not, there's nothing special about this, but what's key is that now you're mapping truly terms that are linked out to the real world ontologies. My comment here was, going to BRD. This was their second example. Maybe say this one is defining the acronym definition. Remember, this is the part that's linked to the text back down here. So when I click on this, we know where that came from. This is the veterinary extension definition or link. And then antimicrobials and first line treatment. These are related concepts that obviously relate to treatment of BRD. I'm not suggesting this is a first line treatment, but you get the point. I'll put maybe not. And this is basically a definition of what she was talking about. So these relate to each other in this way. It's completely separate from this series of examples that she'd given us. And you can see, so we've created a couple of small maps here. Now, what about the use of translation? Well, let's say I want to just take this last section here, and somebody who's Spanish speaking, I want them to understand how to do this. So this is built in 10 different languages. We're going to start with, just like you would online, we're going to start with English, and we're going to translate to Spanish. And so we're going to accept that. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but here's a translation for somebody else of what she just said. And what I was trying to get at, it may be useful to replicate the text inside one of these nodes for somebody in a different language. So we did take that text. I wish we could grab it. It's something I'll ask him to work on and analyze that. Then we can start up with English, Spanish, and translate. Accept. So here's a translation. So you can see the capabilities of being able to pull in ontologies, pull in Google Translate, and in addition, you can imagine that a student wanting to map out their own paper ahead of time could do what I did, is create these sort of comments, put in a thought, and say, okay, how does that link to the real world? And then do their writing later. So there's a couple of ways it can be done. So hopefully that gives you a general idea of what the capabilities of CGMAP are and with respect to the biomedical ontologies. And I'd be happy to answer any questions via email or our community or on the VetMed Academy VetSig community. Thanks.